Welcome to the Experts in Sport podcast, brought to you by the School of Sport, Exercise and Health Sciences at Loughborough University.
Welcome to the Women in Sport mini-series. This dynamic mini-series explores how cutting-edge research and innovation and strategic investment are reshaping the future of sport for women and girls. This series is proudly supported by the Institute for Advanced Studies at Loughborough University and Spirit of 2012, as part of a wider commitment to inclusive research, innovation and impact. With the Women's Rugby World Cup 2025 and a landmark of Summer of Women's Sport across the UK, Europe and worldwide, we'll be diving into topics like athlete performance data, inclusive design and apparel, and other topics that are relevant to a number of different stakeholders. As the Women's Rugby World Cup 2025 unfolds across England, this episode explores how major sporting events create ripple effects in local communities. From civic pride and cultural programming to health and education initiatives, we ask, what does home advantage really mean off the pitch? I'm really excited to be joined today by Cllr James Petter, Deputy Leader of West Northamptonshire Council, and Dr Becca Leopkey from the University of Georgia to unpack the visible and invisible impacts of hosting part of the tournament and how to ensure those benefits are inclusive and long-lasting.
Hello.
Powered by the Loughborough University Women in Sport Research and Innovation Hub, we are here to elevate expert perspectives, uncover overlooked challenges and spark transformative conversations. Now I'm going to hand over to you both today to explain who you are, your current role and professional background. So Cllr James Petter, I will start with you, please.
Yeah, hello and welcome and thank you very much for having me. My name is Cllr James Petter. As mentioned, I'm the Deputy Leader of West Northamptonshire Council. I've had quite a varied career to get to where I am today. Back in the day, I started as an engineer, then moved into retail. Worked for some very exciting brands that some people might be aware of, like Selfridges, Harrods and John Lewis. And a couple of heritage brands like the Wax Jackets, very famous Barber clothing. I then got into firefighting, interestingly enough, not actually putting the fires out myself, but providing products to do that. And then kind of fell into logistics, is where I am now. So my role is probably perfect for my position as a counsellor, because to be a counsellor, you need to be pretty understanding of what goes on in the world and have a very good broad brush. So yes, and my title at the moment is portfolio is local economy, culture and leisure. And within that, it includes sports and recreational things such as what we've been doing here. So it's very exciting.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, James. And I should note immediately that Northampton is one of the official host towns for the Women's Rugby World Cup 2025. And myself and Becca were lucky enough earlier in the summer to actually visit. So this is a very exciting conversation today where we can not only talk to you about your official role, but also what's been happening deep in the heart of West Northamptonshire. Becca, please could you tell us a little bit more about who you are, your current role and your background?
Hi, my name's Dr. Becca Leopkey, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Georgia. My particular areas of focus include international sport organizations and major event organizing committees. I'm interested in the issues they deal with in their governance structures and dealing with event legacy over the long term.
Superb. And I should also note, Becca, you are now our rivals, given that Canada is in the final. So although we welcome you as a guest today, I'm sure we'll get into that at some point, but no, it's fantastic to have you both on the call and thank you for making time. James, I'm really interested, included in your portfolio and some of your background and connection, what does hosting part of the Women's Rugby World Cup mean for West Northamptonshire and Northampton, and some of the things that you've experienced this summer?
Well, it's been amazing. I mean, any place that can actually host a sporting event is amazing. Bring that up to a world sporting event, so the exposure you'll get across the globe is phenomenal. And I like to say this, and I've said it to many people, we are not a host city, but we're a host town. So when we come up to comparing against the other host cities, I think we do pretty well being a town, but we're a town with a very long heritage, so we can quite easily stand our ground. Over the years, our little town has actually been the capital of this wonderful country of ours. So yeah, it's been an amazing event.
Fantastic. And we'll come on to later on some of the specific activities you're doing. But I think just to underpin that you're a town and a host town rather than host city is super important. Becca, from your perspective and some of the research that you've undertaken, how do you see local hosting, like Northampton's role, contributing to the broader legacy goals in major events such as the Women's Rugby World Cup?
Well, I think maybe at this point it might be important to kind of define what we're talking about in terms of event legacy. So when we're talking about sport event legacy, we're really talking about everything that's left over as a result of hosting that's kind of there longer than the event itself. So whether that's tangible, intangible, positive, negative, kind of long-term sustainable changes that have happened in the host town or the host region as a result of hosting the event. And so I think we can probably break it down into two broader kind of collective ideas. Maybe the legacy contributions to the national legacy of the event. So just being part of the overall big picture success of the event, I think is important legacy for a town like Northampton, and just becoming part of that permanent history, that story of hosting the Women's World Cup, that opportunity to kind of host an event that should be the biggest women's rugby event in the world at the time. I also think we can think about the legacy at the local impact level. So I think first and foremost, it's about community connection. So we're talking about legacy from this event being very specific to the regional hosts, because there are several of them that are participating in the hosting of this international event. But just thinking about increased tourism through the opportunity to bring new people and maybe returning guests to the town. We can think about developing better and stronger connections between community groups and government partners that may not have existed before, or maybe not at the level that they exist now. I also think it's about creating new and innovative ways to engage community organizations and local citizens into really getting behind the hosting of event and maybe future events after developing that event hosted capacity. And then also developing social capacity for both the paid workers of the event and the volunteer opportunities that are being made available by hosting the event in Northampton and other local regions across the country.
Superb, thank you. And for those of you wanting to know far more about the detail of what Becca was just saying from, say, a World Rugby or a Rugby Football Union perspective, we have links to those in terms of the Impact 2025, the official sort of legacy aims that England Rugby have put in. And I think I've just looked it up to make sure that we can say alongside Northampton, the Women's Rugby World Cup has been hosted in Sunderland, in Salford and Manchester, in York, in London, in Brighton and Hove, in Bristol and in Exeter. So I think Northampton's really important, James, based on some of the points Becca was raising, because it kind of representing the Midlands right there.
It is, yeah. Position wise, we're smack bang in the country, and in fact we're 2.5 hours away from any seafront, so we're pretty landlocked. But as a town itself, it's got a rich history of sport. I believe we're one of the only places where within 2.5 miles you can go from rugby, cricket to football, all within that kind of like triangle. So it's quite exciting for us. And being a town, you've always got to sort of like push above your weight, purely because of the fact the cities do tend to get a lot more things based on what they can offer. We were very happy and very lucky, and Becca's right, it's an important part.
So James, how have you harnessed some of these opportunities? What have you as at the council really tried to capitalise on, and some of the activities or planning that you've put into place around the moments that you've hosted the Women's Rugby World Cup?
Yeah, as we've only been, and I've only been in with the council since May. So I would love to sit here and think how much work I've done, but there are other people within the town, the actual council, and with the town itself have worked long and hard on this. And it's not an easy thing to sort of like put forward and actually become a host city / town. A lot of time and effort goes in, and from our point of view, it's all about making sure that the event itself works well. Everything we've done within the market square and all around the area, involving all the people in that actually helped us from the WA, the Women's Institute, for all the amazing yarn bombing they did right across Northampton, through to the people and the restaurants that fed everybody. So it's a huge an event to actually put together, and it's one that we'd like to carry on doing. And this legacy from us can actually show us people out there with these large world premiere events that we can do it.
Now, Becca, I'm going to come to you straight away about something very specific James has just said, which is the Women's Institute and the yarn bombing, because I think you took a great interest in that when you visited Northampton over the summer.
Yeah, I have to say it was really an integral part of the experience. It was kind of a welcoming art explosion of culture around the city. So as you walked from the Fanzone all the way over to the facility, you really got to see the contributions of the ladies in the Women's Institute to really just make people feel welcome in Northampton. I took dozens of pictures. I think that they were great in trying to represent the diversity of the teams that were coming to town, but also the celebratory nature of the event.
And I'd never personally come across the term yarn bombing either. When someone's kind of informally said to us, James, is because Becca and I were with a couple of colleagues and we were taking great interest, like Becca's saying, in the stuff outside the station and how it kind of went from that fan zone to the stadium. And someone said to us, oh, it's yarn bombing. I must admit, inside I was like, that can't be the official term. And yet it was.
Yeah, it's if I can remember rightly, the roses, for an example, they took about 45 minutes each to make, and they did over 6,000 of them. And that doesn't include all the flags and all the different other things they had right across, draping across Northampton. Right from the fact of in the town centre, we wrapped a tree trunk, which is it looks so impressive. And yes, the ladies did an amazing job, and yeah, we're very, very proud of them. But they do an amazing job all the way across the country. But yes, welcome to yard bombing. Quite a fun thing to do.
Yeah, I have to say, I was speaking to Verity while I was there, and he said, you know what a great idea would be in order to kind of celebrate this great activation at the event would be to save a lot of that yarn bombing, store it for a few years, and then in 5 years' time, have an exhibit at the local art gallery to kind of have this like celebration of legacy and kind of bring about all the positive memories associated with hosting, but also recognizing the ladies for their contributions to the hosting of the event.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly something we're going to be doing. I mean, they're standing up in the weather as well. I mean, that's impressed me because they've been hanging on lamp posts and fences all the way across Northampton. Yeah, so far, you know, they keep their colours and they do a fantastic job. So very impressed. Very impressed.
Amazing. And for those that are listed in, you can just sort of Google or use any search engine. If you just put in WI rugby yarn bombing, Northampton is the first there to look at some of the fantastic pictures, and in particular some of the really big pieces that were commissioned. And again, James, it wasn't until I sort of dug down with colleagues on your side and people in England Rugby that you know, it was an idea from the Women's Institute that then grew and has just been supported. And I think that underpins some of the points Becca was raising about these planned and unplanned. So again, from your perspective, James, from what you've sort of been listening to since May and then what you've experienced, how do you think from a local economy, culture and leisure perspective, you're going to attempt to sort of carry some of these activities and this momentum on?
Yeah, I mean, these events are amazing, but of course the biggest things you want to do is make sure that they benefit and everybody around benefits. So, and as I've already mentioned, the partnership with Northampton Saints and the Loughborough Lightnings, they've already embedded coaching, school outreach, community programs that will carry on well after the tournament, which is the important part. You know, a lot of the places that they've actually have invested into bring actually better sort of like events for them. So some of the training grounds, they've actually been improved. And we're just going to need to move it along and carry on. And it's great to see that schools have been very much engaged in this and making sure, you know, girls are out there, including themselves. So it's such an important part of it for the long-term growth of women's sports and, of course, Northamptonshire itself.
It's super interesting. And Becca, coming back to you on some of this, what types of community engagement strategies or lessons can we learn for partnerships and planning in some of the settings you've seen from not just the Women's Rugby World Cup, but other events that you've studied as part of your research and innovation?
Sure, Verity, thanks. I think one thing is developing a clear legacy vision before hosting the event and then having specific measurable goals that you can actually show your citizens and your residents after the fact about what you've actually contributed to and how you've impacted the community. It's also a good way to show potential future events, how you can activate around and have a successful event hosting experience. I think it's important to recognize that those legacy visions and goals and objectives should be very specific to the community that's trying to host the event. They can't be pushed down from the international or national governing body because they don't understand the people that are there and the resources that they have access to, and also the existing relationships that are there that can help them really activate providing and planning for a sustainable event legacy after the event. I even think too, something like a memorandum of understanding or maybe some sort of a formal agreement between stakeholders that are involved in the hosting of the sporting event can really kind of clarify and be transparent about responsibilities pre, during, and post the event in terms of trying to support and steer collective decision making after the event can be important. And I think finally, proper stakeholder communication. So keeping stakeholders and citizens informed about what you're trying to achieve as a result of hosting this event, how they can be involved, and how they can kind of contribute to the decision making and the success of the event.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, you're correct there. I mean, partnership is a difficult one and a tricky one to sort of like do, and there's no single organisation that can deliver this kind of impact on its own. So an event like this doesn't just happen. I mean, the council can provide infrastructure and local leadership from that point of view. The universities around that got very much involved can bring, research and innovation from your point of view. And that's the national bodies you've already mentioned. These give us resources and profile. But at the end of the day, it's working together to make sure this tournament is an absolute success. And then basically from that point onwards, it's a genuine transformational position for the town and all the host cities. And this doesn't happen without community-driven side of things. It can't happen moving forward without the community stepping up and actually getting involved in everything. So, yeah, it needs to be from the top down, but not too much, because it needs to be the community driving this. Because, once the council and all the people step away from this, we're not going to literally just step away. We are going to be there all the way through it. And into the future, but it's getting the local community right behind it to make sure it never stops.
And I'd like to follow up there because I think that one thing that struck me between what Becca's just explained and then James, what you were kind of expanding on, is that Northampton, either via the council's leadership and infrastructure or some of these community partners, has been quite agile to adapting to what's been a success or to adapting to what some of the community needs were. And something that I picked up on quite quickly was the use of the Fanzone. So James, Can you just explain, for those people that don't know Northampton, because Franklin's Gardens is approximately 1.5 kilometres from the actual town centre, can you just explain to us what Market Square is outside of tournament time and then how it's kind of transformed into this fan zone?
Yeah, and I must bring in here actually, because none of this would happen without the support of certain people, and I can't go down and thank them all. I'll be here all day. But the one person that has sort of like spearhead this is Charlotte Orton. Now her role is major sporting events, and she has been the driver for everything that you've seen right through the whole of Northampton, and how she managed to keep going all the way through is beyond me. And it hasn't finished for her. She keeps on doing it. But yeah, going back to Northampton itself, we're very lucky. We have a very large market square in the centre of our town. It's very historic. It's one of the oldest and largest market squares in the country. Now, we literally just had, over the last few years, some regeneration on it. So it's perfectly positioned to actually host for this. But the actual fan zones were hugely important. Now, each one throughout the weeks that we did them were a little bit of a driver onto different things. So we did either music related or technology related. So we had VR glasses. And then it basically came to the last one, which was a big, huge musical event, which was a huge success. But it's important for us because, yet again, you need to have somewhere central for people to come to. So having this location was extremely nice, and I hope both of you really enjoyed yourself coming to the Market Square. And I think everybody picked up. And just to sort of go on that, if you look at how many people came, so some of the figures were quite astounding. So we had 48,000 fans that turned up in Franklin Gardens in the end, which was a huge number from all over the country and all over the world, which is really good news for Mars. The Market Square was absolutely full. Even after, like, the knock-on effect of our Grosvenor Centre saw a 20% rise in footfall, and we had about 120,000 visitors in the first week, which is like Christmas numbers. So that sort of like just shows you how successful this has been. What we say, the proof is not just in the sports stadium, but it's how to energise the whole town. And as I said, we're very lucky to have the market, and that's where it all went.
I also think the Fanzone zone was really great kind of opportunity to engage in rugby and art in the city. So while I was there, I threw my first rugby ball, hanging out with the Northampton Saints and, Loughborough Lightning. I contributed some community art, colored in some spaces on a international kind of painting. I did some silent disco, so I engaged in that technology aspect. I got my Ireland Rugby Union flag to go support at the game, and I tried out some acai beer, which I think is the sponsor of the Women's Rugby World Cup. So I wasn't even there that long, but I really felt kind of the ability to engage in a variety of different platforms where there was evidence that there was collaboration happening across a bunch of macro sectors.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I've got a picture. You probably did the same thing where I was, where they basically gave you a blank canvas and said, paint what you feel. Mine ended up being like a forest from Canada, actually. So I'm sure some deep full meaning is a situation that's here for me. But you're right. It was right across the board. We had the bar in the middle, which the lovely thing about rugby that I've always found going to the games over the years is that this is one of the events where you can have alcohol and sports mixing very nicely with families, etc. It was an amazing event. So we're very proud of it. Absolutely proud of what happened, and the team have done an amazing job, and of course the Market Square holders and all the shop holders around the area, they all stepped up. They absolutely did an amazing job, and they've reported back to us that it's been a huge success from them, one of many more events, many more.
I think that's definitely something that struck me as well, having been to Fanzone's a couple of different events now, whether it's ones that were connected to Euros 2022 or other long-standing events in the UK. It was that, like Becca's saying, that meld of local and national partnerships, all the sponsors of the tournament. Because I don't necessarily associate Northampton with arts or alcohol, but learned so much from just engaging with some of the different partnerships there, for sure. From your side, James, there's been so much positivity, and like you said, the figures already are just, like you say, to get the footfall that you're getting around the festive period in the middle of towards the end of the summer, especially with some of the uncontrollables like the weather or disruption to transport. What are some of the immediate priorities for yourself and colleagues like Charlotte Orton for harnessing this and making sure, not just for some of the local sports clubs and some of the elite assets, but for some of these community assets to sort of take this forward? Are you intending on hosting more events? Do you think this is going to galvanise more business support? Or what does a schools network look like? So I'm interested from your perspective, what's the priority once the tournament's over for Northampton?
Yeah, well, you won't be too surprised to learn that all the businesses around Northampton have been asking myself and the team, when's the next one? So, we'll just pop on another world event just the following weekend. But it's hugely important. As I said, it's the short-term boost that we have now, and what we've seen is absolutely amazing. But we need to make sure that carries on. So, you already mentioned the schools, and I said a bit later on the partnership between Northampton Saints and the Lightning, that they've been embedding coaching, school outreach, community programs, which are all need to sort of like carry on now and after the tournament. And as I said already, the facilities have improved. So we are vital. The actual town needs to sort of like now we've had a taste. We've done events like this before. We had the cycle event before, and we've had several over the years. But now that the whole of the town's got a taste of something on the grand stage, we're just trying to work out what we can do next. Unfortunately, I understand that the Cllr World Championship doesn't. We can't have that just yet. But you never know. We might better have something interesting. And for anybody that's not familiar with that, it's a very interesting thing. And I ask you to go look up the Cllr Championship.
I will be one of those people that needs to look it up. I think that's a really good point of that, like what next is. It's not just about what next in terms of your events calendar, but what is of interest. And that speaks to the point Becca was raising, is that it needs to be a clear legacy vision. Becca, if you were kind of presenting back to James and Charlotte and others at West Northamptonshire Council, what from your research and innovation would be some of the big do's or the big don'ts of some of these immediate next steps for capitalising on being on the world stage?
Well, it's interesting you bring up this concept of innovation, because I do think it's at the forefront of events. I think innovation and collaboration are probably how we kind of can lean on creating successful events. And so innovation specific to the context, we know that from the literature. It's also important to understand that innovation is not about creating something new to the world. It's about bringing in something new to the organization or the event itself, and kind of using that to address specific event issues. What we've learned so far from studying innovation in mega events is that mega events like LA 2028 and Paris 2024 did rely on strategic external relationships to enhance innovative capabilities. So it really is about leaning on who's in your community and what resources and what relationships do you have, and what relationships can you build to be successful event hosts in the future. We also know looking at those larger events that smaller incremental innovation, making small changes at a time, is a little bit easier, because if you're going out there making radical changes, a lot of those are going to require approval from those governing bodies of the sport events. And while they embrace change, it's hard for them to take risks on change. And so working in small bites is a little bit easier than maybe biting off the whole idea all at once. It's also important collaborative decision making. So including your staff, including your stakeholders in terms of generating your innovation ideas and being creative, and also having them be part of the decision making process can really make it effective and efficient. The other thing is that sometimes having those smaller trial events, it's really important to test and trial innovations in sporting events. So before kind of releasing it to the greater public, we really need to kind of test and trial out those innovations you're doing in event hosting to get feedback, and really to kind of reduce uncertainty around those innovations. And then I think it's also important to have some knowledge transfer. So when you have someone that kind of incorporates or come up with innovative event activities, having someone be able to tell the next event host, maybe it's not in your town, or the next person to host event in your town, about what really worked well, that was new last time you hosted, and that could work well in the future, is really important to kind of successful event hosting.
And having been privy to some of the work that you referenced, James, I think Charlotte Orton and Pete Cox have kind of got these strategic working groups or legacy planning groups that hopefully will have the time, once everyone's managed to catch their breath after the tournament, to keep those going, because that often is the case. That everything Becca said I was nodding along to, but we know on the cold face of being West Northamptonshire Council or Northampton, it does sometimes come down to the time to do all of that innovation or partnership building or collaboration. And where do you sort of see the council's role in that? Is it purely convening, or do you think that events will become a real feature of what is a really broad portfolio that you have in terms of local economy, culture and leisure?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Pete Cox. He's the head of our sport, leisure and culture. He's got a fun one to do, because how do you pull away from what you've just done here? So once the dust settles, I'm not going to say who's going to win at the weekend, but once the dust settles and we actually sort of have a winner, we will be sitting down and actually saying, right, what is going to happen now and what the impact will be. Because we, as I said, we don't want to stop. We don't want to stop here, and so we shouldn't stop here. But you're right about the fact of sometimes the change and how it can happen and how easy it can happen. I mean, luckily we've got, as I said, we've got a very good sporting heritage within Northampton itself and across the county. So we're pretty good about being clever about the way we do things. And it's interesting because when we first started this, the Rugby World branding had very strict rules and regulations when it landed in Northampton. We had crazy ideas, trust me, crazy ideas, but some of those had to be reined in. But as things progressed, and even the sort of like the team at the Rugby World Cup started to see some of the things that we could do, they became a little bit more flexible. Which was very encouraging. And I think that's one of the things that we need to move on and carry on with, is the fact that if things do need to change, and as a council, it's a tricky one because, I mean, government councils themselves, they use a good old classic. It's very difficult to turn that ship. It takes a long time to do it. But we're a very, very agile team. And if we can say yes to something, we will most definitely say yes to it. So yeah, I mean, the big thing from my point of view is to continue with the partnerships, continue with all the different national bodies that's already been mentioned, and ensure that the biggest success from my point of view, especially from this particular event, is more women and girls playing rugby and other sports here in Northampton, and across the county and across the country, because once these women and girls play these games and suddenly realize that they go on tour and they visit around the other places in the country, I mean, a lot of these girls probably have not really been far from where they live. So, you get involved in these and they can end up not just going to here, into Europe and into the world. And next time they might be in Canada. And how exciting is that? And that's what I get so excited about it, is just saying, the opportunities that sport brings you.
Yeah, I think that's important to emphasize, that I think that you're pretty lucky to have an existing relationship with the Loughborough Lightning and the Northampton Saints, because not only can they provide the government organizations and kind of the organizing committee prior knowledge about existing partnerships and collaborators within the sport in the area, access to their volunteer and fan base, and they can provide a space for testing innovation if you're trying to be a bit more creative in that event hosting space. But I think also what's important is that once the event is over, the literature tells us that everyone's trying to kind of increase the sport participation legacy, but ultimately the literature also says that's one of the hardest ones to actually achieve long term. And so while there's generally a peak or a spike following the hosting of the event of interest in that particular sport, it's a partnership with the Loughborough Lightning and the Northampton Saints that's going to be able to make that legacy initiative last over the long term. So they really can play an important role in keeping sport in front of female eyes, in front of family eyes, in front of the whole community, and kind of reinforcing the notion that women's sport is important and rugby is important to the region.
Yeah, very much so. And as he's already mentioned, we're very lucky to have this sort of like partnership with them anyway. And I have to say, from a male's point of view, sometimes boys can be a little bit tricky to keep going and actually enjoy something once they've started it. But girls certainly don't seem to have that problem. Every single one that I've seen so far has just jumped into this 100% and won't stop. And yeah, they are absolutely amazing. And I'm very proud of everything that's been happening.
I'll come in there with, rather than asking a question, is putting in a almost concern I have, being a person at Loughborough University, is when we first started partnering with West Northamptonshire Council to do and support some of the activations around the Women's Rugby World Cup, it was like, well, there's multiple universities in the area. And we were like, yes, of course, University of Northampton is very important. And we partnered with them in a couple of events, fine. But with the Northampton Saints Loughborough Lightning franchise, I think, James, you've hit the nail on the head that the success of the tournament almost provides a fear and concern, because I'm looking at your figures, 48,000 fans. Like, the atmosphere in Franklin's Gardens across all the matches that I was very lucky to go to, and Becca, you went to a couple as well, was electric. And I'm now just like, oh my goodness, how do we channel that and make sure that the games at Franklin Gardens as part of the Professional Women's Rugby League, so the PWR, how do we make sure that that atmosphere within stadia, which was spilling out into the coaching opportunities, the volunteer opportunities, the whole sort of shebang, how on earth do we capture that? Because I must admit, one thing that caught me off guard, even though I also specialise in legacy and events, was just that atmosphere in Franklin's Gardens was electric. It was magnificent. And Becca, I don't know if you have that, being at a university which also specialises in sport as well as research and innovation. I don't think we'll reach the Georgia Bulldogs' high peak of spectatorship, but it's universities and these sort of elite franchises have a role to play, don't they?
Yeah, so I think obviously collaboration is super important. I actually think it provides a perfect opportunity for a case study to see how you do maintain and what were the gaps and what can be done better in the future, just to kind of keep that momentum going. Collaborations are important because they help spread out risk, they help share responsibility, they help provide access to resources that you might not actually have access to otherwise. And just the hosting capacity and skills that you're getting from kind of hosting the event is really integral across having university collaborations, venue collaborations, national bodies involved, and that networking that you're getting to meet people involved in that process. I don't know if there is an answer to how do we keep that celebratory kind of atmosphere at the event, but perhaps it gives people things to work towards and know that it can happen with the right kind of ingredients involved in hosting the event.
And certainly Northampton and the Saints ground has a reputation for actually having an amazing atmosphere. You go to any of their matches and the thrill of it is phenomenal, and it's palpable. You can feel it. You can sort of like almost taste it. And it's interesting because of course we had lots of different people from all over the sort of like the world, and we had an event. So the women's growth event at the same time, and some of those came along to the match, and we had I can't remember her name, which is absolutely awful, and she absolutely kill me next time I sort of like speak to her if I'm lucky enough to see her. But a lady from America, a doctor, who said, it's the first time she's been to an event like this, and she found it phenomenal. Even though that in America, Canada, you have huge events, and I've been to quite a few ones in Texas and right across the board, and the numbers are just astounding. I don't think there's anything quite like a game of especially rugby being played, and the atmosphere you get, and the sound and the singing. Yet again, and all these things are huge. And right in front of me, funny enough, I had the WI sitting in front of us with all their crazy hats on, which was very entertaining. And one of the things that they sort of said, these are ladies that are in their sort of like other side of their lives, would be polite on sort of that side, but they were just saying one of the things that they can do and what they will do is make sure that they put this down through to all the contacts they have, because WI have got their fingers in everything. And this is the thing. I want to certainly start to work with more schools after this to see whether we can get them to more of the matches, more of the things, give them the opportunities to feel it, because it's unfortunately sport is not a cheap thing to go watch. If you especially, in football, that's crazy prices, but rugby is normally quite reasonable. But we need to look at ways of actually doing that. And the council need to look at ways, because sometimes we do need to have a bit of a lead in many ways from that side. But we're very lucky here, very lucky. The Saints and the Loughborough Lightnings have always been right there, supporting everything going into our schools. But yeah, if only we could bottle it. If only we could bottle it, send it out to people and say, just open that for a second, have a look, have a feel, and come along. That would be. So I don't know whether that's possible. If anyone can do that, bottle an atmosphere, because that would be the winning combination.
Well, to round us off, James, I can provide one magical thing, which is the name. I believe you were speaking to Dr. Catherine Razzoni when you were speaking about the atmosphere. She was a doctor that came across to speak to.
Yes, that was it. Correct.
Yeah, she spoke at the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery, then at Loughborough University, because of her pioneering research around bras and breast health. And I think she thought she was coming to speak to informal settings and
That's
just
great.
kind of do that traditional sort of academic and medical way of knowledge exchange. But actually, by putting people in the museum and art gallery, then in the stadia, you end up having these magical convening conversations. And I tell you what was a visionary statement or a golden thread from a number of the people that sort of convened for those events. And I think this links to the schools, colleges, universities, is a lot of it was actually around like the health and well-being side. So the sport's great, the event is great, well, the being in the museum is fantastic, but you could see certainly from a women and girls perspective, whether it is your older age volunteers or your youngsters that you're trying to just engage in some form of recreation, what kind of links from the conversations we were having, sort of anecdotally, was health and well-being. So it certainly provided us at Loughborough a really good challenge to how to make sure everyone keeps going to the games, but also there's a difference, isn't there, Becca, with women and girls and events. I think we're seeing it's pushing legacy and what we know of legacy. I don't know if that's a good way to set you up to sort of some final remarks from what you've listened to. But yeah, from my perspective, there's something here to do more research on.
Yeah, I think the UK and England in particular is providing us a really good platform in the next 10, 15 years, because I think there's some significant interest in kind of hosting women's events, which is super exciting because having a legacy of women's events, not just the Women's Rugby World Cup, I think is important. And that will also help maintain the momentum of the excitement around sport in places like Northampton. So kind of creating that larger event portfolio where you're specifically trying to focus on bringing in some large scale women's events from cricket to potentially the Women's Soccer World Cup is pretty exciting. And so it really does kind of allow us to potentially, as researchers, kind of focus on really what are those long-term impacts on leadership and women in governance roles in sport, where is ultimately a place I think that we need to see some major growth to kind of keep this momentum going and kind of provide opportunities for women, even while they're in sport, but also once they're done sport, to kind of contribute giving back to that larger community.
Yeah, that's very true. Actually, and I would say just basically get involved, volunteer. Because some of the yet again going back to the rugby fest we did down at Abberton Park, which was an amazing event. That some of those youth teams there were parents. Literally, just started up thinking we don't have anything, so we'll just start thinking, and now they're actually on the stage playing with it, sort of out there doing a great job. And this is the biggest thing. So volunteer, join the local club, go out and actually go there, support women's sports. Bring family, because these things are all family driven. Yet again, sometimes sports in the football kind of side of that can be a bit, you can't bring your kids, especially within rugby. Absolutely, that's what it's all about. Because legacy isn't built by the council. It's not built by all the major ones. It's built by the communities. And that's the thing that we need to make sure. So as far as Northampton itself, we've given the stage to people out there to carry and run with it. And they've used our facilities. They've had the visitors have come and seen what Northampton's like. So from our point of view, on a global stage, we want our community to feel prouder, business to become stronger, which of course is the biggest effect, and that's where more money can go back into it. But ultimately, making sport more accessible, and that's the legacy that I feel that will come out of this. Making sports more accessible. Making girls and women playing more sports. And the other take on this from a male's point of view, I sat in one of the events that was for the women's growth, and I felt a bit of an imposter in sitting in this room with some very powerful women. But the fact that they didn't care. They absolutely cared, of course, but it's when it comes down to it, there's so many things with social media, and girls have to sort of come up to the certain level of what the social media is saying. But in sport, all that gets stripped away. There isn't any of that. It doesn't make any difference. Myself, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'2", but that does not mean that I can't play with somebody that's 4'0", and sort of like a slip of the size. And women have also seen that. So it doesn't make any difference what you are. Come along and just play. It's great fun.
I think that's a fantastic way to sort of round off, and I'll do my last sort of footnote that I've just made sure that I've looked up the specific date, because dates I sometimes have a habit of saying the wrong day, But Sunday, the 2nd of November at 1 p.m. is the next Loughborough Lightning Northampton Saints game. It's against Sale Sharks. With my northern accent, I can't hide, but also admit that I have a soft spot for Sale Sharks. But I think if we round off with imploring people to get involved in their local community and imploring people to keep supporting the teams at Franklin's Gardens, that's a good way to end.
I just want to sort of like my closing comment is just thank everybody. Thank everybody that's been involved. I don't even know how many hundreds of people, thousands of people that have been involved in doing this right across the country. But certainly Women's World Cup Rugby has done an amazing job, and I feel very blessed to be involved in my small part of it. And I will make sure that it continues and we start moving forward and just developing it. And hopefully, let's get some of these other sports back into Northamptonshire.
Thank you as well. Just as someone who didn't know a lot about rugby and is probably past their peak rugby years, I'm now a rugby fan for life.
Excellent. Well, there you go. It's been a success. One or 1,000 or 1,000,000, it doesn't make any difference. As long as there's one, there's always a success.
And also a massive success of yarn bombing. Yes, I think you mentioned it earlier, James. If we attempted to thank all the contributions and organisations of people, but I think you've mentioned some key characters there in terms of Pete and Charlotte, but also from the organising committee, Holly, Bex and Sarah and others that have just absolutely enabled this magic to come to life. Thank you both so much for everything today. This has been, we've not even covered everything Northampton did. You did that much around the Women's Rugby World Cup. So I'd encourage anyone listening to potentially just take a look online or even around the town just to see what's been going on, because it's been very impressive. And if you've heard anything that Becca or I have mentioned around research and innovation that you'd like to learn more about, please do reach out. But it just leaves me to say thank you very much, Dr Becca Leopkey and Cllr James Petter, for joining us today for a really enjoyable podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having us, and it's lovely to see you guys again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Experts in Sport podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, then please contact me, Martin Foster, at m.foster@loughborough.ac.uk. Thanks for listening. See you next time.